The 10 unacceptable behaviors Carl Jung warns us never to tolerate. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. Every day, we encounter behaviors that drain our spirit, distort our truth, and quietly chip away at our self-worth. But what if the real danger isn't just in what others do to us, but in what we allow? In today's video from Spiritual Wisdom, we explore the 10 unacceptable behaviors that Carl Jung, one of the most profound minds in psychology, warns us never to tolerate. These aren't just psychological insights. They're keys to reclaiming your inner peace and honoring your spiritual path. As you listen, reflect. Which of these have I justified in the name of love, loyalty, or fear? Leave a comment below sharing your experience. Your voice could be the light someone else needs. 1. Emotional manipulation disguised as love. Emotional manipulation often slips into our lives dressed as love. It shows up as concern, as protection, as care, but beneath the surface, it's a strategy of control. You're told things like, "I'm only doing this because I love you," while your choices are slowly narrowed and your instincts questioned. You begin to shrink, not because you're weak, but because someone else is confusing possession with affection. Carl Jung warned against this illusion. He believed that when you betray your soul's truth to maintain peace with others, you fracture your psyche. And that fracture, over time, becomes suffering you can't quite name. It manifests as anxiety, depression, numbness, a spiritual illness born not from trauma alone, but from tolerating the slow erosion of your inner voice. The danger lies in how easily manipulation is mistaken for love. A partner might control your decisions and call it protection. A parent might shame you and call it guidance. A friend might guilt you and call it honesty. These aren't acts of love. They are expressions of fear, masked by emotional closeness. And the more you allow them, the more you doubt yourself. Your intuition dims. Your sense of self becomes dependent on their moods, their approval, their version of you. This is not connection. It is emotional entrapment. And spiritual wisdom reminds us that any relationship demanding you to abandon your truth is not sacred. It's a lesson. Jung taught that what we fail to make conscious will rule us, and we'll call it fate. So if we don't become aware of these patterns, we attract them again and again in different people, in different forms, but always with the same emotional cost. That's why recognizing manipulation is not just psychological work, it's soul work. You're not just protecting your boundaries, you're restoring your inner authority. Because real love empowers. It invites your growth, your freedom, your full presence. It doesn't ask for smallness in exchange for acceptance. The moment you stop tolerating emotional control, the moment you name it for what it is, something shifts. You return to yourself. You begin to trust what you feel instead of what you're told to feel. And in that space, you find a clarity that was buried beneath years of compromise. Love rooted in truth doesn't need guilt as a tool. It doesn't thrive on sacrifice. It flourishes in mutual respect, in honoring each person's path without fear or pressure. When someone uses guilt to keep you close, they're not showing love. They're managing their fear of losing control. You are not here to be molded by others' insecurities. You are here to live aligned with your soul, to stand in relationships where freedom is not a threat, but a shared value, to call out false love not with blame, but with awakening. That is the deeper teaching behind Jung's wisdom. Spiritual awakening begins the moment you stop tolerating what feels wrong and start trusting what feels true. Comment below. I choose truth over control. If you're ready to break free from emotional manipulation and reclaim your self-worth, let this be the moment you honor your soul's truth and step into clarity. 2. Contempt masked as honesty. Saying "I'm just being honest" can often be a mask for something much darker: contempt. While honesty is essential in any meaningful relationship, it becomes damaging when used as a weapon. True honesty, as Carl Jung emphasized, is not meant to wound, but to awaken. It carries with it the energy of compassion and clarity, not condescension. When someone repeatedly criticizes under the banner of truth, what they are often revealing is not your flaw, but their own shadow, an unacknowledged part of themselves they unconsciously project onto you. Contempt is one of the most corrosive forces in human interaction. When dressed up as honesty, it becomes even more insidious because it wears the mask of virtue. You begin to question your sensitivity, wondering if you're too fragile or too reactive. But this is not about fragility, it's about emotional integrity. Repeated exposure to contempt, even subtle forms, chips away at your self-worth. You begin to shrink, to edit yourself, to anticipate criticism before you even speak. Eventually, the emotional environment becomes one where love feels conditional and approval becomes a performance. Carl Jung taught that the unconscious, if not made conscious, will rule our lives, and we will call it fate. When we allow someone's contempt to define how we see ourselves, we begin living from their unhealed perception rather than our own truth. You start adjusting to their version of who you're supposed to be, forgetting the wisdom of your own inner voice. And the longer you tolerate this disguised hostility, the more disconnected you become from your authentic self. Real honesty doesn't seek to dominate. It seeks to reveal with care. It may be direct, even uncomfortable at times, but it comes from a place of love, not superiority. Jung's spiritual wisdom reminds us that every act of true communication is a meeting of souls, not a contest of egos. If someone uses honesty as an excuse to demean, belittle, or correct you constantly, they are not engaging in truth-telling. They are trying to control the narrative of your worth. In daily life, this dynamic plays out in subtle ways. A partner who comments on your weight just out of concern. A friend who questions your career choices because they care. A colleague who always finds a flaw in your work, but insists they're helping you improve. These are not random criticisms, they are patterns. And patterns, as Jung taught, are symbols of unconscious forces at play. If those patterns leave you feeling small, anxious, or silenced, they are not rooted in light. The most dangerous part of contempt disguised as honesty is that it makes you complicit in your own erosion. You begin to justify the pain because it's wrapped in the language of truth. But truth without empathy is not truth. It is violence. It is a form of psychological colonization, where your inner landscape is slowly rewritten by someone else's unresolved pain. To honor your self-worth is to recognize when someone's honesty is actually their shadow speaking. And to walk away from it is not weakness, it's spiritual maturity. Have you ever mistaken cruelty for honesty? If you're ready to choose truth with compassion over correction with contempt, comment below. I choose kind honesty. Let this be your first step toward emotional clarity and spiritual strength. 3. Control packaged as protection. Control that disguises itself as protection is one of the most subtle yet dangerous forms of emotional manipulation. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It doesn't bind with chains, it binds with guilt, fear, and conditional love. What often sounds like, "I'm doing this for your own good," is not a gesture of love, but a reflection of someone's fear projected onto your path. This isn't about care, it's about containment. Carl Jung warned us that anything unconscious will rule our lives, and we will call it fate. When you unconsciously accept this kind of control as love, you start walking a path that is not your own. Real love expands you. It invites you to grow, to rise, to reach into every corner of your potential. But false care? It suppresses you. It demands that you fit into someone else's version of safety, someone else's idea of who you should be. It's the parent who discourages your dreams under the guise of realism. It's the partner who needs to know where you are at all times, but calls it worry. It's the friend who fears your transformation because it threatens their comfort zone. At first, it feels innocent, maybe even flattering. Someone wants to protect you, look out for you, guide you. But slowly, you begin to hesitate. You filter your thoughts. You question your desires. You ask for permission to be yourself. And that's how it begins, the erosion of your autonomy. Bit by bit, your soul starts to dim. Not because you're weak, but because you've been taught that sacrifice is love and obedience is peace. The danger lies not only in what others do, but in how easily we begin to tolerate it. The voice inside you that once screamed for freedom becomes a whisper. Your dreams don't disappear. They just feel distant, like they belong to someone braver. You tell yourself, this is normal. You convince yourself, it's okay. But deep down, there is an ache, a quiet knowing that something sacred is being traded away. Jung believed that spiritual awakening begins the moment you stop lying to yourself. And one of the most common lies we tell is that being controlled is a form of love. It's not. Love listens. It doesn't dictate. Love doesn't restrict. Love empowers. It doesn't manipulate. When someone uses fear, guilt, or protection as a reason to limit you, they are not guarding you. They are guarding themselves from their fear of your evolution. You were not created to fit into the comfort zones of others. You were not meant to live a life that only exists to keep someone else from feeling insecure. The truth is, you don't owe anyone your silence, your shrinking, or your surrender just to preserve their illusion of safety. This is not love. This is not protection. This is spiritual confinement, and recognizing it may be the very key that sets you free. If this message speaks to your soul, repeat after me. I reclaim my freedom. I trust love that empowers, not controls. Four, gaslighting the assault on your inner compass. Gaslighting is not just manipulation. It's a subtle form of psychological warfare that targets your inner compass. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It doesn't strike you down in one blow. It unravels you slowly, moment by moment, until you don't recognize your own reflection. You begin to question what you saw, what you felt, what you remembered. The person gaslighting you doesn't just deny your reality, they replace it. And once your version of truth is eroded, theirs becomes the only one that matters. You begin to doubt your memory, your instincts, even your sanity, until you can no longer tell where you end and they begin. What makes gaslighting especially dangerous is its quiet repetition. It starts small: a forgotten promise, a denied conversation, a subtle accusation that you're too sensitive. But these aren't random. They're calculated seeds of confusion. And confusion becomes your new normal. You start apologizing for things that aren't your fault. You stop voicing discomfort out of fear you're overreacting. Eventually, you stop trusting yourself entirely. You become emotionally dependent on the one who is erasing you. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." That's true when you're in a safe space to grow. But gaslighting doesn't offer that space. It doesn't invite self-discovery. It hijacks it. It strips away your ability to reflect honestly because it convinces you your feelings are flawed. And when you no longer trust your own emotions, you can't tell the truth from illusion. That's the real theft, not of love, but of perception. Long-term gaslighting reshapes the way you see the world and your place in it. You're no longer the author of your own story. The manipulator holds the pen, deciding what's real and what's not. They train you to second-guess your intuition, molding you into someone more malleable, more dependent, more controllable. You don't even realize how much power you've handed over until one day, your silence feels safer than your voice. But there is something sacred about your inner knowing. It's not just emotional intelligence, it's spiritual wisdom. Your intuition is a divine gift, not a flaw to be corrected. When someone repeatedly causes you to question that gift, they're not loving you. They're dismantling you. They are not helping you grow. They're making sure you don't. You cannot walk a path of spiritual awakening if you are constantly being pushed to abandon your truth for someone else's comfort. You must understand, your boundaries are not too much. Your memory is not broken. Your heart is not wrong. The moment you start to reclaim your truth is the moment healing begins. And healing doesn't require their permission. It only requires your decision. You do not owe your loyalty to someone who thrives on your confusion. You owe it to yourself to break free. Gaslighting is never love. It's a power play dressed as concern. It's emotional manipulation masked as care. If someone regularly makes you feel unstable, doubtful, or ashamed of your natural responses, that's not a reflection of your weakness. It's a reflection of their control. Trust that inner voice, even if it's trembling, even if it's quiet, because spiritual wisdom lives in your ability to say, "I know what I felt. I know what I saw, and I trust myself." Stay grounded in your truth by subscribing to our channel. Here, we expose the tactics that distort your inner compass and help you reclaim your clarity and power. You are not crazy, you are awakening. And you deserve to walk in truth, not confusion. 5. Dismissal of your inner world. When your dreams are constantly dismissed or mocked, it doesn't just hurt your feelings, it erodes the very foundation of who you are. Carl Jung believed that our inner world, the quiet space of dreams, instincts, imagination, and emotional truth, is the core of our spiritual life. To ignore it is to deny your own soul. When someone laughs at your passion or tells you your goals are unrealistic, what they're really doing is telling you that your inner voice doesn't matter. Over time, this leads to something far more dangerous than rejection. It leads to self-abandonment. Carl Jung emphasized the journey of individuation, the process of becoming whole by accepting every part of who you are. especially the parts others may not understand. But when you're constantly silenced, you start believing the lie that your truth is inconvenient, that your voice is too much, or that your dreams are simply not welcome in this world. And so, you shrink. Not because you want to, but because the world has trained you to. This is not humility, it is spiritual suffocation. Your light dims not because it went out, but because it was told to hide. This kind of emotional suppression creates a psychological fracture. On the outside, you might seem fine, stable, polite, even successful. But inside, the soul is grieving. You begin living a life that looks good on paper, but feels hollow in your chest. Jung warned that what we fail to make conscious will eventually rule our lives and feel like destiny. In other words, if you suppress your voice long enough, your silence becomes your identity, and you won't even realize it. In today's world, it's not uncommon to see someone walk away from their true calling because others convinced them it wasn't practical. The artist who became an accountant, the healer who chose a corporate job, the writer who stopped writing. These are not small compromises. These are spiritual wounds, and the people who discourage them, often well-meaning. But good intentions do not excuse deep invalidation. What Jung's spiritual wisdom makes clear is this: dismissing your inner world is not just a personal mistake, it's a collective tragedy. Because when even one person abandons their authentic self, the world loses something irreplaceable. That is why you must protect your inner world the way you would protect a sacred fire. It is the source of your light, your clarity, your healing, and your purpose. Anyone who tries to extinguish that light, whether with mockery, criticism, or cold indifference, does not deserve access to your soul. And perhaps most importantly, never become your own silencer. Your dreams were given to you for a reason. Your feelings are valid. Your inner world is not a weakness. It is a compass pointing you toward your highest self. If this message speaks to your soul, repeat after me. My inner world is sacred. I honor it, I protect it, and I reclaim it today. Let this be your turning point. Subscribe for more spiritual wisdom and stay connected as we rise together in truth and self-love. 6. Chronic lack of empathy. When someone shows a chronic lack of empathy, they don't just fail to understand you. They slowly train you to believe that your emotions are a burden. Over time, this kind of emotional neglect seeps into your spirit. You start to shrink, not because you're weak, but because your soul is learning to survive in an environment where it's never truly seen or heard. Carl Jung warned that what we fail to make conscious will rule our lives, and we will call it fate. In relationships, if we continue to tolerate being dismissed, ignored, or emotionally minimized, we unconsciously begin to accept emotional starvation as love. Empathy is not a luxury in a relationship, it's the foundation. It's the bridge between two souls that allows vulnerability to exist without fear. Without empathy, love becomes one-sided, performative, and draining. You might find yourself walking on eggshells, always second-guessing your feelings, rehearsing your emotions to make them more acceptable, and eventually disconnecting from your own truth. This isn't a connection, it's self-erasure. It often starts subtly. You share something painful, and they laugh. You open up about your fears, and they roll their eyes. You cry, and they call you dramatic. At first, you try harder to explain. Then you start to hide. Later, you just stop trying altogether. Your silence isn't peace, it's defeat. In a spiritually awakened life, this kind of inner silencing becomes unbearable. You begin to feel the weight of everything you're not saying, and it creates a pressure that no amount of pretending can release. A real-life example is all too common. Someone grows up in a home where emotions are dismissed, then enters adulthood repeating the pattern. They find themselves drawn to partners who mirror that same emotional absence, confusing neglect with normalcy. They convince themselves that needing affection or understanding is too much. But one day, something inside shifts. Maybe it's a breakdown. Maybe it's a quiet moment in the dark. But the realization hits. I deserve to feel safe when I speak. I deserve to be understood. That's the beginning of spiritual awakening, not fireworks and light, but the subtle decision to stop betraying your own heart. Spiritual wisdom teaches that your energy is sacred, and if someone consistently meets your pain with apathy, they are not a safe space. They are a mirror showing you what you must heal and no longer tolerate. Jung didn't tell us to hate those who lack empathy. He taught us to become conscious of the roles we play in allowing that absence to define our emotional reality. Tolerating a chronic lack of empathy is like watering a dead flower and hoping it blooms. Eventually, you must accept that love cannot grow where the soul is not nourished. Spiritual awakening is not just about raising your vibration, it's about honoring your truth. And part of that truth is this: your feelings matter. Your voice matters. You matter. If you're still with us and this message resonates, comment below. I deserve to be seen and heard. Your voice matters, and your presence helps us create a space rooted in empathy, healing, and true connection. 7. Repeated betrayal wrapped in apologies. When someone repeatedly hurts you and follows it with an apology, what you're witnessing is not healing. It's a cycle of control. "I'm sorry" becomes a phrase used not to bring resolution, but to reset the stage for more damage. As Carl Jung insightfully pointed out, repeated harmful behavior is rarely accidental. It's a pattern, a conscious or unconscious choice. Over time, the repetition chips away at your emotional clarity, and you begin to confuse endurance with love. You start believing that staying through the pain proves your loyalty. But what it actually does is slowly strip you of your emotional vitality. You don't become stronger, you become numb. This numbness is not peace, it's emotional survival. Your nervous system, overwhelmed by the inconsistency of hurt and apology, begins to shut down its responses. You stop expecting change. You stop voicing your needs. You begin living in a space where betrayal is normal and healing is a fantasy. And yet, because of your empathy, your capacity for hope, and your desire to see the best in people, you keep forgiving. You keep accepting apologies with no evidence of growth. But spiritual wisdom teaches that forgiveness without accountability becomes a dangerous form of self-abandonment. Jung emphasized that what we tolerate externally often mirrors what we haven't healed internally. When you accept repeated betrayal, it may reflect a deeper belief that you must earn love by suffering for it. This belief is a wound, not a truth. And if left unhealed, it will continue to attract relationships where you are tested rather than treasured. The spiritual awakening lies in seeing the difference between compassion and self-sacrifice, between forgiveness and forgetting, between love and addiction to hope. Apologies that don't come with changed behavior are a form of manipulation. They exist to relieve the guilt of the offender, not to rebuild trust for the one who's been hurt. You deserve more than that. You deserve a connection that uplifts you, not one that erodes your inner peace. Spiritual wisdom is not about endlessly tolerating pain. It's about recognizing the sacredness of your boundaries. Your peace, your clarity, your emotional well-being are not luxuries. They are your compass. When someone chooses the same destructive behavior over and over and only apologizes after the damage is done, what they are really telling you is, I know this hurts you, but I will continue. And when you accept that, without consequence, what you may unconsciously be saying back is, I don't believe I'm worth more. But you are. You always have been. And the moment you stop making room for betrayal, disguised as regret, is the moment your true healing begins. Have you ever stayed too long because you believed the next apology would mean something? If you've broken that cycle, share your strength in the comments below. It might help someone else. And if you're ready to choose peace over pain, comment, I will not settle, to begin that healing journey today. 8. Selfishness disguised as independence. Some people call it independence, but what they really mean is emotional detachment dressed up as strength. Carl Jung warned us to pay attention to these masks, because not all independence is healthy. True independence doesn't fear connection, it embraces it. It's grounded in self-awareness and emotional maturity, not avoidance or control. But when someone constantly keeps their distance, rarely initiates contact, and calls it just how I am, that's not independence. That's a subtle form of selfishness. In these one-sided dynamics, you find yourself doing all the work. You're always the one reaching out, checking in, trying to bridge the emotional gap. You convince yourself that you're being supportive, patient, or understanding, but deep down, you're starving. Starving for reciprocity, for warmth, for presence. And yet, you stay because you've confused dysfunction with loyalty. You've mistaken your ability to carry the emotional load as proof that the relationship is worth saving. But Jung taught us that what you resist not only persists, but will grow in size. When you ignore the truth, the imbalance only deepens. Take the story of Lisa. Her friend Adam insists he's fiercely independent. He doesn't do clingy, he says. But over time, it becomes clear. Adam never initiates, never checks in, unless there's something in it for him. Lisa finds herself constantly pouring in love and energy, only to be met with silence or indifference. She questions herself. Am I too needy? Am I not strong enough? But the problem isn't her need for connection. The problem is that she's trying to feed a bond that's emotionally bankrupt. Jung would say, Adam is acting from the shadow, avoiding intimacy, hiding behind a label, and projecting his fear of closeness onto someone who just wants something real. True connection can't exist without mutual effort. It's not supposed to feel like chasing or begging. If someone's independence consistently leaves you feeling unseen, exhausted, or emotionally invisible, then you're not in a relationship, you're in survival mode. Spiritual wisdom reminds us that love is not supposed to drain you. It's meant to grow you. And Carl Jung knew that our unconscious patterns, especially what we tolerate, shape our fate. The longer you stay in a relationship where giving is expected and receiving is rare, the more you train yourself to accept crumbs as nourishment. This is where your self-respect must rise. You are not too much. You are not demanding. You are simply asking for emotional presence from someone who may never be ready to offer it. Their silence is not your fault. Their coldness is not your cue to try harder. The moment you begin excusing this pattern, you betray your own inner needs, and that's where true loneliness begins. In the language of the soul, withdrawal without communication is a form of punishment. And when someone keeps you close enough to benefit, but far enough to avoid responsibility, you become their emotional caretaker, not their equal. Carl Jung believed that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life, and you will call it fate. Recognize the pattern, name the distortion, and most of all, reclaim your energy. True independence is not about keeping people out. It's about knowing you can stand alone while still choosing to open your heart. If this message resonated with your heart, comment below. I deserve mutual love and soulful connection. Let this be your affirmation that you are no longer settling for one-sided effort, only relationships that nourish you. 9. Sarcasm as a weapon. Sarcasm may wear the mask of humor, but when used as a tool to humiliate or conceal hidden resentment, it becomes emotional warfare. A subtle jab here, a mocking tone there disguised as lighthearted teasing, slowly poisons the atmosphere of a relationship. Over time, this behavior doesn't just bruise your feelings, it erodes your sense of safety and self-worth. What begins as a joke turns into a pattern where you're taught to question your own sensitivity, to silence your instincts, and to accept disrespect as normal. This is precisely what Carl Jung warned against. He believed that unspoken emotions never truly disappear. Instead, they slip into the unconscious and return as projections, often in the form of passive-aggressive sarcasm. When someone constantly masks their unresolved anger or contempt with sarcasm, they aren't being witty. They're avoiding the vulnerability of direct communication. It's easier to say, "I was just kidding," than to say, "I'm hurt," or "I'm angry." But this avoidance, repeated often enough, becomes toxic. You find yourself anticipating their jabs, shrinking your personality to avoid being the next punchline. And in doing so, you trade authenticity for peace. You begin to tolerate what your soul knows is unacceptable, all for the sake of keeping the relationship intact. From the lens of spiritual awakening, this dynamic is not just damaging, it is deeply misaligned with your higher self. True awakening requires you to become aware of the energies that distort your truth. It invites you to examine what you've allowed into your life, not because you deserved it, but because you were conditioned to believe that love must hurt a little. But love doesn't humiliate. Love doesn't mock your dreams or your sensitivity. Love speaks with clarity and compassion, not hidden contempt. A woman once shared how her partner used sarcasm to belittle her passions. Every time she mentioned her dreams of becoming a writer, he'd scoff, "Oh, sure, the next Hemingway." She laughed at first, thinking it was harmless. But over the years, her dream dimmed. She stopped writing altogether, not because she lost interest, but because she internalized his voice. That's what sarcasm does when left unchallenged. It implants shame where confidence should grow. It becomes a voice you carry long after the speaker is gone. Spiritual awakening asks you to notice these voices, to question where they came from, and to decide whether they still belong in your life. It's not about cutting people off. It's about refusing to let unspoken hostility live in your sacred space. The moment you awaken to how deeply sarcasm has shaped your behavior, is the moment you begin reclaiming your voice. Because healing doesn't start with others changing. It starts with you no longer tolerating what makes your soul shrink. If this message resonates with you, declare your truth. Comment below, "I deserve respect," to honor your healing and remind others that safety and connection is not optional, it's essential. 10. Emotional withdrawal as punishment. Emotional withdrawal is not about needing space, it's about taking control without accountability. When someone chooses to shut down, to withhold their presence, their voice, their warmth, it isn't silence, it's strategy. This kind of cold detachment is not a quiet act of healing. It's punishment without words. It creates confusion, isolation, and deep emotional injury. You begin to question your worth, to replay every interaction, trying to decode what you did wrong. But the truth is, this isn't about what you did. It's about their refusal to face what's inside themselves. Carl Jung recognized this as a shadow behavior, something born from the unconscious parts of a person that they haven't yet faced or integrated. To Jung, true growth begins by bringing those unconscious patterns into the light. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. So when someone uses emotional withdrawal to punish, they're not setting boundaries. They're acting from their shadow. They avoid vulnerability. They flee from conflict. And in doing so, they damage not only the connection, but their own ability to evolve. It's important to understand the difference between emotional regulation and emotional manipulation. A mature person can say, "I need time to process this," with clarity and intention. But someone ruled by their shadow says nothing at all, expecting you to feel their anger, their disapproval, their control in the silence. They use emotional absence as a leash, pulling you in without ever having to name their own emotions. That is not emotional intelligence, it is spiritual avoidance. And spiritual wisdom reminds us that love without presence is not love at all. In this dynamic, the one being punished begins to feel like a ghost. You're physically in the relationship, but emotionally discarded. You may start working harder to please them, over-explaining, over-apologizing, internalizing their silence as evidence of your failure. But this is where spiritual awakening begins, when you recognize that their silence is not your responsibility to fix. You were not created to shrink in someone else's emotional winter. You were created to bloom in light. The person who withdraws often believes they're in control. But in truth, they're controlled by fear. Fear of confrontation, fear of rejection, fear of revealing their own vulnerabilities. Instead of saying, "This hurt me," they say nothing and wait for you to break. And when you do, they feel powerful again. But that power is hollow. Because any connection built on silence and fear is a prison, not a partnership. Healing begins when you stop personalizing their distance, when you stop begging for warmth from someone who only knows how to turn cold, when you understand that silence, in this context, isn't peaceful, it's violent. It's an invisible war waged on your emotional well-being. And the only way to win is not to fight harder, but to step away entirely. Spiritual wisdom teaches us that emotional intimacy cannot grow in the soil of manipulation. It grows in truth, vulnerability, and mutual care. When someone withdraws to punish, they are rejecting not only you, but the possibility of transformation. And that rejection is not your burden to carry. It is their mirror to face. So if someone's silence has been echoing louder than their love, let that be your wake-up call. You deserve connection that breathes life, not coldness that steals it. Thank you for taking this journey into the wisdom of Carl Jung with us. These 10 behaviors may seem subtle, even familiar, but tolerating them quietly can slowly erode your self-worth, your peace, and your potential. Jung reminded us that what we fail to confront in ourselves and in others will ultimately control us. So, may this video be your reminder to honor your boundaries, trust your intuition, and never settle for anything that dims your inner light. If today's message resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom for more powerful insights that support your personal and spiritual growth. And make sure to turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment of truth, healing, and transformation. Stay away from people who ask for these 5 things. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. Carl Jung. In today's video on Spiritual Wisdom, we explore 5 subtle yet powerful behaviors that drain your energy and block your growth, especially when others ask them of you. These aren't just red flags in relationships. They are mirrors showing you where to set boundaries and reclaim your inner peace. As you listen, ask yourself, who in your life is asking too much of your spirit? Comment below with your thoughts and experiences. Your story might just help someone else awaken too. 1. Being asked to take responsibility for what isn't yours. People will test your boundaries in subtle ways. It often starts with a small favor, something that feels harmless. Maybe they ask you to listen to their problems late at night, help them pay a bill, or fix an issue they created. You say yes because you're compassionate. But over time, the requests grow. What began as kindness becomes obligation. Without realizing it, you find yourself carrying emotional and even financial loads that were never yours to bear. You're solving problems you didn't cause. You're managing emotions that aren't yours. And while they feel lighter, you begin to feel heavy, exhausted, resentful. That's not love. That's emotional exploitation. Carl Jung's deep insight into the human psyche reminds us that projection is one of the most dangerous defense mechanisms. People often project their pain, guilt, or irresponsibility onto others, and those with open hearts are the easiest targets. They'll frame their needs as your responsibility. But here's the truth. You are not their therapist, their bank, their savior. You are not here to fix lives at the expense of your own well-being. The moment you agree to carry what's not yours, you start walking away from yourself. And no relationship, whether it's with a partner, a parent, a sibling, or a friend, is worth abandoning your peace. Spiritual wisdom calls for discernment, not just empathy. Boundaries are not walls that keep people out. They are gates that protect what's sacred within. If someone is constantly asking you to be responsible for their choices, their healing, or their mistakes, they're not seeking connection. They're seeking control. And control often wears the mask of closeness. They'll guilt you, flatter you, even spiritualize the dynamic by saying you're the strong one, the old soul, the chosen healer. But real healing doesn't make you feel drained. Real connection empowers both people, not just one. This kind of manipulation operates on silent contracts. You help them, and in return, you expect appreciation or change. But often, neither comes. Instead, they ask for more. They learn that you will say yes, that your guilt will override your instincts. And every time you say yes to something that violates your inner truth, you weaken your connection with yourself. You begin to live reactively, constantly adjusting your energy to accommodate theirs. That is not spiritual alignment, that is self-abandonment disguised as virtue. Letting go of what's not yours is not cruelty. It's clarity. It's an act of sacred self-respect. When you say, "This is not mine to carry," you're not turning your back on love. You're turning toward a healthier expression of it. You're saying, "I will love you, but I will not be your emotional crutch. I will walk beside you, but I will not walk for you." That is spiritual maturity. That is integrity in motion. We must understand that helping someone isn't about sacrificing your own soul. It's about knowing your role. You can support, guide, and inspire, but you cannot rescue. Even Christ didn't heal everyone who asked. He responded to faith, to willingness. So why should you give your light to those who aren't willing to rise? If someone consistently brings you problems, but never solutions, pain, but never progress, chaos, but never accountability, they are not aligned with your path. Spiritual awakening sharpens your inner radar. You begin to feel when something is off. You hear the hidden messages beneath the surface of requests. Help me sometimes really means carry me. And that is where your boundary must stand. Not from anger, but from understanding. Not from fear, but from truth. And your energy is your responsibility. Protect it as if it were your lifeline, because it is. You are not obligated to be anyone's cushion for consequences. Say no when needed. Withdraw when necessary. Remember, your peace is not a sacrifice. It is a statement of divine self-worth. Let them carry what's theirs. Let them grow through it. That is the greatest gift you can offer. Not your rescue, but your refusal to enable. That is the wisdom of boundaries. That is spiritual wisdom in its highest form. Have you ever said no to something that wasn't your responsibility? If so, share your story in the comments to inspire others to set healthier boundaries. If not, comment, "I will choose myself to take the first step toward emotional freedom." Let's support each other in reclaiming our peace. 2. Being asked to lend money outside of emergencies. Lending money to someone you care about can feel like the right thing to do. But when it's not a true emergency, that one-time favor often becomes a pattern, one that slowly erodes your peace of mind. At first, they say they just need a little help to get back on track. You trust them. You care. You give. But as time goes on, the requests don't stop. They grow. The problem isn't just the money leaving your account. It's the emotional pressure, the subtle guilt, and the unspoken expectation that you'll always say yes. Carl Jung taught that what lies beneath the surface of human behavior often holds more power than what's visible. Repeatedly asking for financial help without accountability is rarely just about money. It's a symptom of a deeper dynamic. It reflects a lack of responsibility, a misuse of trust, and often unconscious emotional manipulation. You become the safety net for someone who refuses to build their own. They don't see your kindness as a gift. They start to treat it as a given. Many people find themselves in this trap without realizing it. You lend out of love, but soon you're sacrificing your well-being, your savings, and your sense of safety. You start avoiding their calls, feeling anxious when their name pops up on your screen. That's not love. It's emotional entanglement. And it drains more than just your bank balance. It drains your spirit. True emergencies are different. When someone genuinely needs help because of a crisis outside their control, and you have the means to offer support, that's compassion in action. But ongoing requests, especially those made without repayment, growth, or gratitude, cross a spiritual boundary. They take advantage of your good nature, and the more you allow it, the more they expect it. You are not selfish for saying no. You are not cold-hearted. You are wise. You are drawing a necessary line that says, "My peace is sacred." Spiritual wisdom teaches that discernment is just as important as compassion. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is to let someone face the consequences of their choices. That's how people grow. That's how self-respect is built. You must ask yourself, is this helping them rise, or is it keeping them small? Are you giving because it feels right, or because you're afraid of being seen as the bad person? Your worth is not measured by how much you sacrifice for others who refuse to take responsibility for their own lives. Your energy, your resources, your peace, they matter. Protecting them is not only practical, it is profoundly spiritual. Carl Jung once said that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And sometimes, asking for money again and again is just that, an avoidance of doing the inner work. Don't let someone else's avoidance become your burden. If it costs you your peace, it's too expensive. Always. Comment below. I choose peace over pressure. If you're ready to protect your energy and set healthy boundaries with money. And if you've ever been in a situation like this, share your story in the comments. Your wisdom might help someone else find the strength to say no. 3. Being asked to mediate family conflicts. Being asked to mediate family conflicts may sound harmless, noble, even, but it's one of the most subtle and dangerous ways your peace, clarity, and spiritual energy get hijacked. The moment you agree to step into the role of the mediator, especially in emotionally charged situations like inheritance disputes or long-standing grudges, you're not being empowered. You're being used. It's a hidden trap that masquerades as responsibility. But in truth, it's a weight that doesn't belong on your shoulders. No matter how well-intentioned you are, trying to fix wounds that aren't yours to heal will eventually drain you to the bone. You'll find yourself emotionally bankrupt, exhausted, and confused, wondering how you ended up in the crossfire of a war that began long before you even had a voice in the family. Family conflicts, especially those involving pride, old trauma, or money, are rarely looking for healing. More often, they seek validation, a witness to the chaos, or worse, a scapegoat when things go wrong. And if you're the one with a calm presence or an awakened heart, you automatically become the emotional sponge. But spiritual awakening means recognizing when peacekeeping becomes self-betrayal. You cannot pour from an empty cup. And you certainly can't be the referee in a game where both teams secretly want you to lose. There is a spiritual wisdom in saying no, in holding your ground, in protecting your inner sanctuary from becoming a battleground for generational pain. People who ask you to mediate their conflicts are often trying to avoid their own inner work. They want you to step into the fire so they don't have to. But you are not their therapist, their savior, or their emotional janitor. You are not responsible for fixing dynamics built on decades of unspoken resentment, control, or dysfunction. Carl Jung once said, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people." And yet, so many want you to confront other people's darkness, while they themselves refuse to even acknowledge it. That's not healing. That's spiritual outsourcing, and it leads nowhere but your own depletion. Spiritual awakening is about awareness, and part of that awareness is knowing when your help is actually enabling, not empowering. Take Mia, a compassionate woman in her mid-30s, who agreed to mediate a heated dispute between her mother and uncle over their childhood home. What began as a sincere desire to bring peace turned into months of emotional labor. Accusations flew, sides were taken, and when it all fell apart, guess who got blamed? Mia. She was accused of bias, of not trying hard enough, of making it worse. In truth, she did everything she could, but it was never her battle to begin with. And in the process, she lost her sense of balance, clarity, and joy. That's the price of stepping into conflicts that are not aligned with your soul's purpose. The truth is simple. Not every family storm requires your umbrella. Not every problem needs your intervention. There's strength in silence. There's power in stepping away. And there is deep spiritual wisdom in choosing your peace over forced loyalty. Just because someone is family doesn't mean they have access to your spirit. Your energy is sacred, and the more awakened you become, the more you realize that guarding your peace is not just an act of self-care, it's an act of spiritual responsibility. So the next time someone comes to you asking you to mediate their emotional chaos, remember this: you were not born to be the sacrificial lamb for broken systems. You were born to awaken, to rise, to shine from a place of wholeness. And that requires boundaries. That requires discernment. That requires the courage to say, "I love you, but I will not lose myself to fix what you refuse to face." That is the kind of strength your spiritual awakening calls for. Not the strength to carry everyone's burdens, but the wisdom to know which ones are yours. Have you ever been caught in the middle of a family conflict, trying to fix what wasn't yours to begin with? If so, share your experience in the comments below. Your story could help someone feel less alone. If not, comment, "I choose peace," to affirm your commitment to protecting your energy and well-being. 4. Being asked to change who you are or how you live. As you journey through life, especially after seasons of transformation and spiritual awakening, there will come a moment when people around you, family, friends, even colleagues, begin to project subtle or direct expectations on how you should live. They may suggest that you change the way you dress, speak, believe, or move through the world. These requests may sound harmless, even loving at times, but underneath, many of them are rooted in discomfort with your individuality. The truth is, asking someone to change who they are to fit into someone else's standards isn't helpful. It's a quiet form of erasure. It dismisses the years you've spent becoming who you are. It ignores the spiritual battles you've endured, the self-reflection, the healing, the nights you prayed for clarity, and the mornings you woke up determined to start again. To ask someone to abandon that for the sake of blending in is not just disrespectful, it's damaging. The problem is that many people don't recognize this for what it truly is. When someone says, "You'd be more attractive if you dressed differently," or "Maybe you shouldn't talk about your beliefs so openly," They are not offering insight. They're handing you a mask. And too many people, afraid of conflict or rejection, put that mask on. They begin to shift, to mold themselves, to comply with someone else's narrative. Slowly, their soul begins to dim, not because it lost its light, but because it was told that shining was too much, and that is the price of approval that is far too high. True spiritual wisdom teaches us that alignment with our truth is sacred. It is not meant to be compromised for temporary comfort or external applause. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And this becoming isn't a performance, it's a deep, often painful unfolding. So when someone asks you to alter that, to abandon what you've discovered through your awakening, you must see it for what it is: a demand rooted not in love, but in fear. People fear what they don't understand. They fear what challenges their beliefs or calls out their inauthenticity. And often, your unapologetic presence does exactly that. You reflect back to them the courage they haven't yet accessed. You awaken the longing they've buried beneath roles, obligations, and illusions. That's why authenticity is not only your power, it's your responsibility. Every time you choose to remain true to your values, your pace, your voice, your spirit, you declare to the world, "I am not here to entertain expectations. I am here to live fully." That level of self-respect becomes a beacon for others still trapped in self-abandonment. It gives them permission to say no, to reclaim themselves, to stop editing their soul for the comfort of others. So when someone asks you to change the essence of who you are, pause. Ask yourself if what they want is love or control, alignment or convenience. Because you are not a character in their story, you are the author of your own. And your spiritual awakening was never meant to make you more acceptable to them. It was meant to make you more aligned with God, with purpose, and with truth. Let no one rewrite that. If this message speaks to your soul, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss content that honors your authenticity. Comment below. I choose to live as my true self. If you're ready to embrace who you are without apology, without compromise. 5. Being asked to prioritize others' feelings over your own. Sometimes, love disguises itself as obligation. You're told to be quiet when your truth makes others uncomfortable. You're encouraged to shrink, to silence your needs, to place other people's feelings above your own. It begins with guilt, subtle expectations, unspoken rules. Don't upset them. Don't be too much. Don't ask for what you need. But over time, this emotional suppression becomes a cage. You wake up one day, realizing you haven't been living for yourself. You've been living to keep the peace. And peace that requires your silence is not peace at all. Carl Jung taught that the greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent. That same burden often shows up in adult relationships. A partner wants you to hold back your ambition so they feel secure. A family member demands your time, your presence, your energy, yet gives no space for your truth. This isn't love, it's control. True love, real respect, spiritual wisdom, they all allow you to exist in fullness. If someone cannot love you without asking you to hide your light, then they do not love you. They love your compliance. There was once a woman who spent years sacrificing her own joy to keep her relationships intact. She always said yes, even when she was drowning inside. She apologized just to end arguments. She swallowed her pain so others wouldn't have to face their own discomfort. Her name could be Maya, or perhaps it's your name. Her story echoes in so many of us, until one day she said no. And the people who claimed to love her called her selfish, cold, distant. But that wasn't the truth. The truth was, she had finally stopped abandoning herself. There comes a point when saying no is the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for others. Because anything built on guilt, fear, or the need to keep someone comfortable is not sustainable. Carl Jung reminded us that wholeness comes from integrating the parts of ourselves we've hidden. And often, we hide them because we've been taught they're too much, too intense, too inconvenient, too real. If someone asks you to prioritize their comfort over your authenticity, you must remember, you are not responsible for regulating their emotions at the cost of your soul. Love never demands self-betrayal, and spiritual wisdom teaches that every time you silence your truth, you drift further from your purpose. That's the real cost, not the temporary discomfort of conflict, but the permanent ache of a life unlived. So when someone looks you in the eye and asks you to forget yourself for them, know that your answer holds the weight of your becoming. Say yes to yourself. Say yes to your voice. Say yes to your truth. Anything else is a slow death of the spirit. To honor your truth and reclaim your light, make a bold declaration. Comment below, "I choose myself," to affirm your right to live authentically and inspire others to do the same. And if this message speaks to your soul, like this video, subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss a moment of spiritual strength and self-love. Thank you for joining us today on Spiritual Wisdom. As you reflect on Carl Jung's powerful insights, remember your energy is sacred. Protect it by staying away from those who demand what drains your soul or compromises your growth. True spiritual alignment comes from honoring your boundaries and choosing relationships that nourish your higher self. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. And make sure to turn on the notification bell so you never miss the deep, transformative content we have coming next. Until next time, stay wise, stay awakened.